Let us venture into a world where Naruto Uzumaki became too much of a threat to the point that his entire clan, the Uzumaki clan masters of jutsu, had to come together to put their very life on the line to ensure that they locked him away for the rest of eternity. But what will happen when that seal finally start to break by one stupid accident? Let us see, guys.
The island had always been a quiet place. That was by design. The Uzumaki had chosen it precisely because of its remoteness, because of the way the ocean stretched unbroken around it for miles in every direction, because the natural chakra currents running through its bedrock were dense and strange enough that most shinobi who approached by sea felt a creeping unease they could never quite explain and decided, without knowing why, that they had better things to do than investigate. The island was not on any map that outsiders held. The Uzumaki had made sure of that. They were careful people, even when they were afraid, and what they had built beneath that island's stone was the most careful thing they had ever made. They called it the Stillwater Vault, a chamber cut 300 feet into the earth, its walls carved from top to bottom with sealing script so dense and so layered that the stone itself had begun to take on chocolate properties after decades of saturation. The natural energy of the island, the deep slow current that the Uzumaki called nature chakra, had been redirected over years of precise jutsu work until it ran through the vault like blood through a heart, a living containment system that used the world's own energy against the thing sealed inside it. The logic was brutal in its elegance. The seal did not fight Naruto's hunger. It fed it gave him exactly enough absorbed energy to keep him alive and docile, a measured drip of power that satisfied the worst of the need without ever letting him accumulate enough to act. It was, the elders had agreed, the only solution. They had not been happy about it. Even the ones who had voted for containment without hesitation had not been happy. Naruto had been 5 years old when they sealed him. 5 years old with hair the color of sunlight and a gap-toothed smile and a habit of following his sister around at 3 paces because he knew proximity was difficult for the people near him and he had decided at some age too young to articulate that 3 paces was a compromise he could live with. He had loved his clan. He had been a child and he had loved the world around him in the enormous unguarded way of children who have not yet learned to portion out their affection. But when he touched things, they diminished. When he stayed too long in a room, people grew tired without knowing why. When he lost his temper, the chocolate drain accelerated to a radius that had, on 2 terrible occasions, knocked trained Uzumaki shinobi to their knees. And by the time he was 4 years old, the clan's most senior Funjutsu masters had run enough measurements to understand that the thing happening inside him was not leveling off. It was growing. His body was developing around his power rather than alongside it. The biological structure of a human child reshaping itself to accommodate something it had never been designed to hold. His chakra coils were not coils at all. They were something closer to an open mouth facing inward, a structure built entirely for intake, and the older he got the wider that mouth was going to open. The elders had made their decision. Kushina had screamed at them. She was 7 years old and small for her age, and the volume she produced in the Elder Council chamber that day was something several of the surviving witnesses would bring up for the rest of their lives. She had called them cowards and monsters in terms that were sophisticated beyond her years, and she had said, very clearly, that Naruto would never hurt anyone he loved on purpose and that a seal was just another way of saying that they did not trust him enough to try. The eldest of the elders, a woman named Asako who had personally designed the Stillwater Vault and who would die in the destruction of Uzurshio years later without ever fully forgiving herself, had knelt in front of Kushina and taken the girl's hands and told her the truth plainly, which was something adults rarely did with 7-year-olds. She said, "It is not about trust. It is not about whether Naruto wants to hurt anyone. A river does not want to flood the village. It floods the village because that is what rivers do when there is too much water and nothing strong enough to hold it. Your brother is the water, Kushina, and right now we are the only banks he has, and we are not strong enough." Kushina had pulled her hands away. She did not stop arguing for 3 more days. She went to every elder individually. She made her case in council, again and then again. She was 7 years old and she conducted herself like a barrister and lost anyway, because the decision had already been made and because the measurements did not lie, and because even the elders who were moved by her argument could feel, when they stood in the same room as her brother, the slow quiet drain of energy from their bodies, and feeling it was a different thing from hearing about it. The night before the sealing, Kushina had sat with Naruto in the 3-pace zone he maintained out of habit, and they had talked the way children talk when they don't have the vocabulary for what they're actually saying. circling around the weight of it without ever landing on it directly. He had told her about a bird he'd seen that morning. She had told him about something a friend had said that was funny. They had eaten dried fish and said nothing about tomorrow. When she got up to leave, he had said, very quietly, that she should not let them give her to Konoha. She had turned around. He had said, they will try. After this, they will decide that you are too valuable to stay somewhere this small, and they will send you to Konoha like a gift, and you will go because you always do what is best for everyone and you will be fine there, you will be fine anywhere. But I do not want you to go somewhere I cannot reach. She had been quiet for a moment. Then she had said, I will not go anywhere. They had both known, in the way children know things they cannot yet name, that this was not a promise either of them had the power to keep. The sealing took 6 hours. The vault's containment array was activated at dawn, and Naruto walked into it voluntarily, which was the one concession he had extracted from the elders. That he would walk in himself, on his feet, and not be carried or tricked or sedated. He was 5 years old and he walked into the Stillwater vault with his spine straight and his eyes open, and the sealing script closed over him like a hand closing over a flame, and the chamber went quiet. Hisako had been the last one out. She had stood at the threshold for a long moment, looking back at the single point of light that marked where the containment array's center burned, and then she had sealed the door behind her. Uzushio fell years later. It fell to a coalition that had been building its case against the Uzumaki for decades, the hidden villages who had grown tired of a clan that sold its funjutsu expertise to every nation equally, who understood that a neutral party was a threat to anyone trying to establish dominance, who saw the approaching Third Shinobi War as the moment to eliminate a wildcard before the board was set. The attack came from 3 directions simultaneously on a morning when the fishing was good and the markets were full, and the Uzumaki fought with everything they had, because that was the only way they knew how to do anything, and it was not enough. Hisako died in the 3rd hour. Most of the elders were gone by midday. Kushina was not there. She had gone to Konoha 4 years prior, not as a gift, exactly, but as something close enough to it that the distinction didn't matter much in practice. The clan had needed an alliance and she had been old enough to be the face of one, and she had gone because Hisako had been honest with her again, the way she was always honest, and because Naruto was sealed away and could not be heard by her absence, and because she had told herself that Konoha being safe meant she could do more for him from there than she could from a small island in the middle of the sea. She had not been wrong about that. She had simply not anticipated that there would be nothing left to do more for. The island that held the vault survived the attack. It was not part of Uzushio proper, and the coalition did not know about it. The sealing work the Uzumaki had done on the bedrock held the island's natural chakra in its careful arrangement for years after the vault was constructed, feeding the containment array its measured supply of energy, keeping the seal intact and the thing inside it quiet. For 30 years, it worked exactly as designed. Then the settlement came. They were funjutsu practitioners, 6 of them, part of a loose collective of scholars and mercenaries who traded in recovered sealing techniques and sold what they found to whoever paid the most. The Third Shinobi War was churning through the continent and sealing arts were valuable in wartime, and Uzushio's reputation had been the greatest in the world, and dead civilizations left their libraries behind. They found the island by following fragments of old maps purchased from a merchant who had purchased them from a man who had purchased them from a dead Uzumaki soldier's effects. They were not masters. The eldest of them had 15 years of funjutsu study behind him and a sincere appreciation for the craft and the kind of confidence that comes from knowing more than most people around you and not yet having encountered anything that knew more than you. They spent 2 days on the island before they found the vault's exterior access point. The script around the entrance was extraordinary. Even the eldest of them stopped talking when he saw it, stopped his ongoing lecture about Uzumaki technique and simply stood in front of the carved stone and read. It took him an hour to get through the first layer. The second layer was in a cipher he had never encountered. The third layer was not a cipher at all but a living arrangement of chakra bound into the stone itself, responsive and adaptive, designed not to be decoded but to resist decoding by consuming the chakra of anyone who tried. He tried anyway. He was, as previously noted, confident. He reached into the third layer with his chakra and found the nature chakra current running through it and thought, incorrectly, that he understood what he was touching. He pushed. The seal pushed back. He pushed harder. The nature chakra in the stone resisted for approximately 3 seconds, and then something deeper in the array registered the interference as a structural thread and rerouted, the way water reroutes around a blocked channel, and the careful measured flow that had been feeding Naruto exactly enough to keep him still and satisfied lurched. The scholar felt the change before he understood it, a vibration in the stone beneath his hands. A pressure change in the air of the tunnel. The chakra in the array doing something that his measurements had not predicted. He had time to say, to the person standing beside him, something is wrong. Then the nature chakra still embedded in his chakra signature converted him. It was not violent, exactly. It was thorough, the stone-binding properties of the island's nature chakra, the same current that had maintained the vault for decades, ran back through the intrusion point like a current reversing direction, and the scholar who had pushed was simply incorporated. His colleagues, who had been standing at various distances behind him, watched a man become a statue in approximately 4 seconds, the petrification moving from his hands upward through his arms and chest with a sound like ice forming on a still pond, his expression fixing into something that was not quite horror and not quite surprise but was instead the particular look of a person realizing that the thing they have just done cannot be undone. His colleagues ran. 2 of them made it off the island. The other 3 encountered what the disrupted seal had already begun releasing from the chamber below, the low-pressure wave of chakra absorption that rolled outward from the vault when the containment array's balance failed, and they ran into it the way you run into a wall in a dark room, suddenly and completely. They did not die, they simply stopped having the energy to run, and then stopped having the energy to stand, and sat down in the tunnel and did not get up. Below them, in the vault, the seal came apart. Not all at once. The Uzumaki had been too good for it to fail all at once. It unraveled in sequence, each layer releasing in the order it had been constructed. The nature chakra flowed destabilizing from the outside in, and each layer that released gave Naruto a fraction more than the careful measured allowance, and each fraction more pushed the next layer closer to its threshold, and in this way the most sophisticated containment seal the Uzumaki had ever produced failed in approximately 40 minutes, which was, given what it had been built to hold, actually quite impressive. Naruto felt each layer go. He had been aware for a long time. That was the thing the elders had not fully accounted for, or perhaps had accounted for and decided not to share with each other. That sealing a body in stillness was not the same as sealing a mind. His consciousness had remained intact inside the vault, had remained intact through years and then decades, with nothing to do but exist and think and feel the constant careful pressure of the seal against his nature. In the first years, this had been maddening. He had raged against the containment in ways that produced no observable result because rage was a chocolate expenditure and the seal converted expenditure back into stillness. He had tried to dismantle the array from within and failed because the Uzumaki had been very good at their work. He had, at some point in what he estimated was the 3rd or 4th year, simply decided to stop fighting it and start learning from it instead. The seal was a masterwork of chakra theory. Living inside it was an education that no academy could have provided. He could feel every layer, feel how they interacted, feel how the nature chakra moved through the stone and into the array and through the array into him. He could feel his own nature against the seal's architecture, could feel where it strained and where it gave, could understand for the first time, with the enforced patience of someone who has nothing else to do, exactly what he was. He spent decades learning himself. He learned that his absorption was not entirely involuntary. It felt involuntary the way breathing feels involuntary, but breathing could be controlled, slowed, stopped for a time, redirected. What had felt like an open drain was actually a function his body defaulted to, a setting he had been born on because no one had ever shown him another setting existed. In the stillness of the vault, with nothing but time and the seal's chakra feedback to work with, he found the mechanism and he learned to adjust it. He learned that the power he had absorbed over decades was not lost to him. It was stored in his coils, in his bones, in something that functioned like a reservoir attached to that great inverted intake structure his body had built around his nature. He was not empty. He was, by any measure he could construct from inside a sealed chamber, full almost past bearing. What had flowed into him through the containment array's measured supply had not been consumed and discarded. It had been added to what was already there, compounding over 30 years of sealed dormancy. He was patient. He had learned patience the hard way. When the seal began to fail, he recognized it immediately. He felt the first layer release and stayed completely still. He felt the second layer go and did not move. He felt the third layer unravel and sat in the center of the vault with his eyes closed and his breathing controlled and everything he had spent years learning gathered inside him, compressed and precise, and waited. When the last layer finally gave way, the release was not the explosion the Uzumaki elders had feared. There was no shockwave, no sudden catastrophic expansion. The containing array dissolved around Naruto Uzumaki like morning fog in sunlight, and he sat in the center of the chamber for a full minute before he moved. Then he stood. His body was wrong, and he understood why immediately. Years of absorption had been flowing through him, and a body that had been 5 years old when sealed had developed in response to that energy the way a plant develops in response to light, growing toward what it needed, restructuring around the power that sustained it. He was not 5. He had never aged, precisely, but he had changed, and change had its own logic, and the logic of his nature had expressed itself across 15 years into something that was approximately 20 years old and built to carry what it carried. He looked at his hands. He accepted this. He moved on. He walked out of the vault the way he had walked in, on his feet, spine straight, eyes open. The tunnel was dark and the 3 collapsed settlement members were in it, still breathing, their chakras so thoroughly drained that they would not wake for days. He stepped around them without particular interest. He found the petrified scholar at the outer access point and looked at him for a moment, reading the remnant nature chakra in the stone with eyes that were now a great deal more capable than they had been 30 years ago, and understood what had happened. He stepped around this one as well and emerged into daylight. He controlled the absorption without thinking about it. This was automatic now, the way keeping your balance is automatic after enough years of walking. He was not leaking. He was not draining the island around him in the old uncontrolled way. He was simply standing on a hillside in the morning light, a young man who looked like no one in particular, with eyes that he had already suppressed to ordinary blue, feeling the press of available chakra from every direction and holding it at a careful distance. He could do this indefinitely. He had practiced. What he could not do was stop himself from reading the island, from letting his perception range outward in that passive way that his nature had always operated, and reading the absence. Uzushio should have been audible from here. The city had been loud, full of life, full of the dense layered chakra signature of a population that had lived in the same place for generations and left the spiritual imprint of that residence in the stone and water and air around it. There was nothing. He turned toward the coast. He moved through what was left of Uzushio in silence. He did not mourn loudly. He had never been a person who mourned loudly. He walked through the ruins of streets he remembered as alive and read what they told him and filed the information and kept moving, because stopping and sitting with it was not something he was prepared to do yet, and he had learned that you could defer things if you needed to. What the ruins told him was thorough and clear. The attack had been coordinated and large and had come from shinobi of sufficient skill to overwhelm the clan that was not weak. The defenders had fought hard. The defeat had been total. The evidence of decades of subsequent decomposition and plant growth told him this had not happened recently, and the structural state of the buildings told him it had not happened yesterday or 10 years ago either. 15 years, give or take, while he was sealed, his people had been destroyed. He found the memorial stones near what had been the clan hall, or found the rubble of where they had been, the carved markers toppled and half submerged in decades of encroaching grass. He rotated one of them, a single stone about the height of his knee, and read the name on it, and set it back down carefully. He did not find Kushina's name. He looked for it, he read every stone he could find, and he searched through what was left of the clan hall's interior with his perception ranging through the debris, and he did not find it. This meant very little by itself. The dead of a battle were not all marked. The absent were not all dead, but the absence registered. He walked to the cliff edge above the eastern shore and stood there for a while, looking out at nothing in particular, letting his perception do what it naturally did without fighting it, feeling the island yield to him in small passive ways that he was no longer letting become large ways. A bird landed nearby and then, sensing something it did not have words for, quietly flew somewhere else. The grass near his feet was yellowing very slightly, but only very slightly, because he was paying attention. He thought about what he knew. He thought about what he needed to find out. His sister was not confirmed dead. His sister had been the most likely person to be taken to Konoha because she had been the most valuable member of the clan in the ways that other villages measured value, because of her chakra, because of her bloodline, because the Uzumaki had maintained connections to Konoha that he had been aware of even as a child. He thought about whether Konoha was a place a young Uzumaki girl would have gone in the aftermath of the clan's destruction. He thought about whether she would have gone before, whether the elders, after sealing him away, had done exactly what he had told them he would not allow. This thought arrived with considerably more edge than the morning had. He set it aside. Speculation without information was useless. He needed information. He left the island by walking across the water, because walking across water was something he had learned to do inside the vault by practicing chakra control in the only space available to him, and also because there were no boats and he was not interested in building one. The ocean beneath his feet registered his passage and gave up fractional amounts of its ambient energy to him as he walked, which was simply unavoidable. But the fish below the surface continued doing what fish do, and the water continued being water, and nothing dramatic occurred. He had the absorption under control. He noted to himself as he walked, carrying more raw power than he had any clean way to measure. Years of intake, stored and compressed and refined by years of deliberate internal work, sat inside him like a pressure he had simply learned to live with. He was above any standard of shinobi he could construct a reference for. He understood this without taking particular satisfaction in it. It was simply the condition he was operating under. He made landfall on the continent in the late afternoon of the same day. He spent 2 weeks moving through the edges of the world, staying away from the large settlements, listening to what the smaller ones had to say. He found information in the way you find information when you are patient and quiet and willing to sit in the corner of a roadside inn and nurse one drink for 4 hours while merchants and travelers talk around you. The Third Shinobi War had recently ended, or was in the final stages of ending, depending on who you asked. The hidden villages were exhausted and depleted, and the peace being negotiated was the kind of peace that exhausted and depleted parties negotiate, fragile and resentful and probably temporary. Konoha had survived the war in better condition than some. They had losses, significant ones, but the village stood. The Hokage was a man named Minato Namikaze, young for the position by all accounts, exceptional by most accounts, the kind of figure who emerged from the grinding machinery of a shinobi war already legendary. Naruto noted this name and filed it without particular feeling. He heard about the Uzumaki the way you hear about things that are old enough to be history rather than news. The destruction of Uzushio was something people knew had happened. It was not something most people thought about much anymore. He listened to the way people talked about it, the particular tone of historical fact that had passed through enough years to lose its specific weight, and noted that and filed it too. He heard about the Uzumaki woman in Konoha from a merchant in a small river town, a woman who sold cloth and who had been to the capital of Fire Country the previous year on business and mentioned, in the course of explaining why Konoha was a strange and interesting place. Naruto's drink stopped halfway to his mouth. He said, carefully and without any particular inflection, "An Uzumaki?" The cloth merchant said yes, one of the last ones. She had bright red hair that was really quite remarkable, and she was apparently a very capable kunoichi in her own right, which you would expect from an Uzumaki. He asked her name. The merchant said, "Kushina, I believe." He set his drink down on the table very gently. Kushina. She was alive, she was in Konoha, she had survived the destruction of everything and had gone to the place he had warned the elders he would not allow, and she had built a life there. He sat with this for a long moment. Outside the inn, the river moved past in the early evening light, indifferent and continuous, the way rivers are. His sister was alive, everything else, all of it, the ruins and the bones and the unanswered questions about who had given orders and who had executed them and what Konoha had known and when they had known it. All of that was still there, still filed, still patient. But she was alive. He walked out into the evening, and the cloth merchant watched him go and could not have explained, afterward, why she felt faintly relieved when he left. He stood by the river for a while. Then he turned, without any particular hurry, in the direction of Konoha. Konoha was loud in the way that all living things are loud. Naruto stood at the tree line on the eastern approach and simply listened to it for a while before he moved. The village sat behind its walls in the late afternoon light, breathing the particular breath of a place that had survived a war and was still in the process of believing it. There was construction noise, the sound of stone and timber being worked, the chakra signatures of hundreds of shinobi going about the ordinary business of a hidden village in peacetime. It was layered and dense and alive, and after 15 years inside a sealed chamber beneath an island, the sheer volume of it was something he had to consciously manage. He adjusted the suppression and walked toward the gate. He looked like no one in particular. He had made sure of that. His eyes were ordinary blue, his hair a faded blonde that attracted no immediate attention, his chocolate signature compressed to something that would read, to a casual sensing, as slightly above average. He had practiced this concealment inside the vault with the same patience he had applied to everything else in those 15 years, because he had understood even then that the first moments of freedom would require him to be quiet before he could be anything else. The gate guards registered him as a traveler and moved him through without incident. He was not there for the village. He had not come to evaluate it or threaten it or do anything to it at all. He had come for one thing, and that thing had a name, and he was following the name through a village he had never been to, reading the ambient chakra the way you read a map. He found her in 20 minutes. Kushina Uzumaki was in the market district, and she was arguing with a vegetable seller about the price of something green, and she was winning, and the sight of her stopped Naruto on the street the way a wall stops a person walking in the dark. She was not what he remembered. She was also exactly what he remembered. The red hair was the same, that impossible red that their mother had possessed and Kushina had inherited, and he had always been privately glad about, because it meant she was easy to find. She was taller. The softness of childhood had become something angular and capable. She moved like someone who had spent years being trained to move, with an efficiency of gesture that was the mark of a kunoichi who had long since stopped thinking about how her body worked and simply used it. She was alive. Something in his chest, something that had been held in a careful, compressed stillness since the ruins of Uzushio, released about 1 degree. Just one, but it was enough that he felt it. He stepped toward her through the market crowd and said her name. She turned. The moment she saw his face, all the color left hers. It was not a gradual thing. It was not the slow paleness of someone receiving bad news. It was immediate, total, the blood leaving her face the way water leaves a cup that has been knocked over, and what replaced it was something that Naruto had not expected and did not immediately know how to read. She was afraid of him, not surprised, not confused, not moved to sudden tears by the sight of a brother she had not seen in 15 years. Afraid, he stopped walking. The vegetable seller said something he didn't hear. Around them the market continued its noise, people passing and calling out and haggling, none of them yet aware that anything was wrong. He said, carefully, "Kushina." She said nothing. Her eyes were moving, not looking at him but around him, and he understood a moment later what she was doing. She was looking for positions. She was a trained shinobi reading the field around her, looking for where she could move and where she could not, looking for support. He said, "Why are you looking at me like that?" She said, in a voice that was very controlled, too controlled, the voice of someone holding something down by force. "How are you out?" He said, "The seal failed. Someone tampered with it from outside. It doesn't matter. Kushina, why are you?" 4 Anbu dropped from the rooftops. They were fast and professional, and they moved to positions around Kushina with the efficiency of people who had rehearsed this, which they had, because Kushina was a 9-tailed Jinchuriki and her protection detail had protocols for threats, and Naruto, standing in the center of a Konoha market reading as a chakra signature that was simultaneously compressed and wrong in ways the sensors could not quite articulate, had triggered every protocol at once. Naruto looked at the 4 Anbu. They looked at him. One of them moved. What happened next was not something Naruto decided to do. It was something that happened the way breathing happens, the way the absorption happened when he was not paying attention to it. A reflex so deep it had become structural. The ANBU's chakra was extended and active and moving toward him, and his nature responded to extended active chakra the way a drain responds to water, and the Hanbu member stopped in midair. Not stopped, emptied. The chakra left the man in approximately 1 second. The biological reserves that kept him conscious and mobile stripped clean with a thoroughness that left no bruise and no mark, and the Anbu fell to the market stones the way cloth falls, without any of the stiffness of a person, just weight and gravity and nothing else. Naruto had not looked at him. He was looking at Kushina. The other 3 Anbu registered what had happened to their colleague and made their own calculations and made them very quickly, and 2 of them retreated without being asked, which was intelligent, and 1 of them came forward, which was not, and suffered the same result as the first at a range of about 4 feet before Naruto even consciously registered that it had occurred. He became aware that 2 people were lying on the market stones around him and turned to look at them with mild confusion. He said, "Are they dead?" No one answered him. He checked with his perception and found both of them still breathing, their chakra depleted to survival minimums but intact, and he noted this and turned back to Kushina, who had not moved and was still looking at him with that expression that he kept not being able to process correctly. He said, "I did not do that on purpose." She said, "I know." He said, "Then why?" She said, "Naruto, stop. Please just stop and listen to me." The market had cleared around them. The ordinary machinery of civilian life had recognized that something wrong was happening and had performed the animal calculation of distance and moved accordingly. It was only the 2 of them now in an open circle of cobblestones, and the 2 unconscious Anbu, and the sound of someone running very fast somewhere in the direction of the Hokage Tower. He stopped. He listened. Minato Namikaze arrived with 6 Jonin and the restraint of a man who was new enough to the position of Hokage that he was still learning when to act and when to wait. He came in fast, the yellow flash of his technique bringing him to the edge of the cleared space in the market, and he took in the scene in the single sharp scan of someone trained to read situations quickly. 2 Anbu down, a man in the center of the square. Kushina standing 6 feet from that man with her hands loose at her sides and her face doing something complicated. He moved toward Kushina. She said, without looking at him, "Don't." He said, in a tone that was quiet and carried significant weight, "Kushina." She said, "He's my brother." The 6 Jonin adjusted their positioning. Minato stayed where he was. He was looking at Naruto now with the particular quality of attention that the most dangerous people in the world gave to things they had not yet classified, measuring and open and very focused. Naruto looked back at him with no particular feeling. Then he looked at Kushina. He said, "Why were you afraid when you saw me?" She said, "Because I know what you are." He said, "You know what I am. You are my sister. You sat with me the night before the ceiling and we talked about a bird. You argued with the elders for 3 days and called Hisako a coward, and she told you the truth about me and you still argued. You know what I am because you have always known what I am and you were never afraid of me before. So tell me why you are afraid now." She was quiet for a moment. She said, "What do you remember about why they sealed you?" He said, "They sealed me because of the absorption. Because I was a danger to people near me and they could not find another answer. I walked in myself. I remember all of it." She said, "What do you remember about before that?" He said, "Before." She said, "The year before they sealed you. The months before. What do you remember?" He thought about this. He had memories of that year, clear ones, the texture of life in Uzushio, specific faces, specific conversations. He remembered his parents. He remembered the smell of his mother's cooking and the sound of his father arguing with the clan council about something administrative, and the long comfortable hours of sitting near Kushina at the 3-pace distance he kept, listening to her talk. He said, "I remember it." She said, "All of it?" He said, "Yes." She said, very quietly, "You don't." Something in her voice made him stop. She said, "Our parents did not die in the attack on Uzushio. They died before you were sealed. They died when you were 4 years old." He said, "That's wrong." She said, "Naruto." He said, "That's wrong. I remember them. I remember the year before the sealing. Mother made fish soup on festival days and father had a scar on his left hand from a training accident, and they were there. They were there when they sealed me. I remember them standing at the..." He stopped. He tried to find the specific memory. His parents at the ceiling. His mother's face. His father's hand. He reached for the precise image, the way you reach for a word you know, and found instead a shape where the memory should have been, an outline without content, the structural impression of a thing that was not there. He said, "What happened to them?" Kushina's eyes were wet. She was not letting herself look away from him. She said, "You did." The market was very quiet. She said, "It was not all at once. It was not like what just happened to those 2 men. It was not a moment. It was months. You did not understand what you were doing. You were 4 years old and you did not understand, and by the time anyone understood, our parents were gone. And you were 5 years old and the elders had measurements that said you had taken the chakra of every person in a 200-foot radius on the night it happened, and you had been asleep and you did not know. You did not know any of it. But they were gone." He was very still. She said, "You love them. Whatever else is true, you love them. But it was not only them. Over the year before the sealing, there were others. Clan members who spent time near you, who volunteered to be near you because someone had to be and you were a child and you were frightened and you needed someone. They volunteered, and one by one over that year they became unwell in the way that people became unwell when they were near you for too long, and then they were gone." She stopped. She started again. She said, 20% of the clan, Naruto, not from the attack, before the seal, they did not seal you away because they were afraid of the future. They sealed you because you had already done it and the elders were trying to save what was left, and you were 5 years old and they could not bring themselves to do anything else. He said nothing. She said, "The elders told me the truth when I was old enough. Hisako told me all of it. She said that you did not remember and that the mind finds ways to protect itself from things it cannot carry, and that whatever you remembered instead of the truth was not a lie you told but a mercy the mind made without being asked. She said that the boy who walked into the vault was not a monster. That he was a child who had done monstrous things without choosing to and who was going to continue doing them without being able to choose otherwise, and that the seal was the kindest answer available." She stopped again. He was looking at something past her shoulder, not at anything specific, just past her. He said, after a long time, "I remember them differently." She said, "I know." He said, "I remember being careful. I remember keeping the distance. I remember trying." She said, "You were. And it still happened." That was the thing that the elders could not solve. The trying was not enough and the distance was not enough, and eventually there was no distance that would be enough. He looked at her. He said, "You argued for me anyway. Knowing that," she said, "you were my brother. You were 5 years old. You were the only person I had left. Something moved across his face that was not quite any single emotion, too large and too complicated and too mixed for a name. He looked at her for a long moment, this woman who was his sister, who had sat with him and talked about a bird and argued with old women on his behalf and grown up without him and built a life in a village he had never seen, and who was standing in front of him now with her eyes wet and her hands loose and her fear still visible underneath everything, the fear that had been there since she first saw his face. He said, "I am not going to hurt you." She said, "I know you believe that." He said, "I am different now. 15 years in that chamber. I know what I am now, Kushina. I know the mechanism of it. I know how to hold it." What just happened to those men? That was reflex, that was not. She said, I know that is what you believe." The distinction she was drawing between what he believed and what was true arrived quietly and landed hard. He said, "Come with me." She said, "What?" He said, "I am not going to stay here. This is not my place and I have no interest in it. But I am not leaving without you. You are the only thing I came here for. Come with me, back to the island, back to where we are from. I will keep you safe." She said, "I have a life here." He said, "I know. I am not asking you to abandon it. I am asking you to come with me." Minato said, from across the empty square, with the careful measured tone of a man who was choosing every word very deliberately. "She is not going anywhere." Naruto looked at him. He said, "This is not your conversation." Minato said, "She is my wife." Naruto was quiet for a moment. He looked at Kushina. She said, very quietly, "It is a recent thing. We have kept it private." He looked at Minato for a moment with an expression that was unreadable, and then back at Kushina, and then he said, "Come with me. You can return. I only want to show you that I am not what you are afraid of. Let me show you that." She looked at him for a long time. She said, "And if I say no?" He said, "You won't." She said, "Naruto?" He said, "You came to a village full of people you did not know and you built something here and I am glad for it. I am. But you are my sister and I have been sealed away for 15 years and you are standing 6 feet from me and being afraid. And I cannot leave without showing you that the fear is wrong. So come with me. You can come back. I only need you to see." The 6 Jonin were watching Minato. Minato was watching Naruto. Kushina was watching her own hands. One of the Jonin moved. Naruto did not look at him. His absorption did not require attention to function. The Jonin's chakra left him mid-step and he sat down on the cobblestones with a confused expression, still conscious but unable to explain why his legs had stopped working. Naruto said to Kushina, "I am not doing that deliberately. You understand that. I am asking you to come with me so that I do not have to keep not doing it deliberately in a small space with many people." Kushina closed her eyes. Minato said, "Kushina, don't." She said to Minato, without opening her eyes, "I will come back. I promise you I will come back." She opened her eyes. She looked at her brother. She said, "If I go with you, you leave these people alone." He said, "Of course." She said, "All of them. Everyone here, the village, Minato." He said, "Kushina." She said, "Promise me." He looked at her with something that was almost exasperated, almost fond, the expression of someone whose feelings are more complicated than the moment allows for. He said, "Come now, sister. I am different now. Things are different." He said it gently, the way you say something you mean, and he held out his hand, and the warmth in his voice was completely real, and Kushina heard it and also heard, underneath it, something that she recognized from a time before the seal, from a time she had been hoping was over. She took his hand anyway. Minato moved. The yellow flash of the flying thunder god covered the distance in an instant, and Minato arrived between them with a kunai extended in the absolute focus of someone who had made a decision and was committed to it. And the absorption took him the same way it had taken everyone else, clean and complete, the chakra stripping from him in a wave that left him on his knees before the technique finished expressing itself. Naruto looked down at him. He said, "You are fast. That is a good technique." Minato, on his knees, with the chakra that had made him the most feared shinobi of the war reduced to civilian survival minimum, looked up at him and said nothing, because there was nothing useful to say. Naruto looked at Kushina. He said, "We should go before more of them arrive." They left. The island looked the same as he had left it 3 weeks prior, the ruins sitting in their patient decay, the ocean going about its business on all sides. He had not cleaned up the ruins. He had not done anything to the island except exist on it briefly and leave, and in that brief time the grass had come back mostly and the stone had stopped its slow dehydration and the birds had returned. which told him that his control was better than it had been at 15 years old and was therefore probably better than it had ever been. He showed Kushina the vault. He did not know why he showed her. He stood at the entrance and looked at the carved ceiling script for a moment and then gestured at it and said, "This is where they put me." She looked at it. She did not say anything for a while. She said, "I used to think about you in there. Whether you were aware, whether it was like sleeping." He said, "It was not like sleeping." She said, "I know. I worked that out eventually." He said, "I learned things in there about what I am and how it works and how to hold it. I am not who I was when they sealed me. I want you to understand that." She said, "I want to understand that." He said, "But," she said, "you drained 4 shinobi in that market without noticing. You put Minano on his knees." He said, "Reflex, I will learn to manage it better. I managed it for the walk here, across the ocean, across the continent. I was in Konoha for 20 minutes before you saw me and nothing happened." She said, "Until it did." He said, "I can learn." She was quiet for a moment. She said, "You feel different to me. Your chakra," he said, "it has grown." She said, "It is not only the size. There is something in it. Something that was there when you were 5. I remember feeling it, but it is larger now. It feels like," she stopped. He said, "Like what?" She said, "Like 2 things that are not quite the same thing. Like there are 2 different qualities to it. Like it is not all the same." He said, "I was alone for a long time. Things developed in solitude." She said, "Naruto." He said, "Come, I will show you the rest of the island. The parts of it that are still standing." She followed him. She told herself that she knew him. She told herself that he was her brother and she knew him, and the warmth in his voice when he talked to her was real. She could feel that it was real. The chakra did not lie about that. She told herself that the other thing she could feel underneath it, the thing she had mentioned and he had redirected, was something she could work with. Something she could reach. She told herself this. She was not entirely sure she believed it. The first reports came to Konoha 4 days later. A small village in Earth Country had sent a messenger to the nearest larger settlement with a report that was confused and frightened and not entirely coherent, about people who had become ill in a single night, who had woken without the capacity to mold chakra, who had tested their reserves and found them absent in the way that a well is absent when there is no water table to draw from. Not depleted, not exhausted, gone in a way that felt permanent and fundamental, gone in the way that an eye is gone when it is removed. Minato read the report at his desk in the Hokage Tower with his hand still unsteady from 3 days of recovery, and read it again and felt the particular cold clarity of someone who has been told something they already knew and was hoping not to have confirmed. He sent messengers to the other villages that same day. Most of them did not believe him. The Tsuchikage wrote back in language that was diplomatic and enough to be insulting. The Mizukage did not write back at all. The Reikage sent a short response that contained the phrase "not our concern," and then, 12 hours later, second response with a very different tone, because in the time between the 2 messages a report had arrived from a mining settlement in Lightning Country describing the same symptoms, the same absence, the same fundamental wrongness where a person's chakra should have been. Then a second village in Earth Country went silent entirely. On the island, Kushina stood at the cliff edge above the eastern shore and watched the ocean. She had been allowed to go where she wanted. He had not imprisoned her or confined her to a room or set any condition on her presence other than her presence itself. He was simply there when she was there, attentive in a way that was fond and immediate, asking about her life in Konoha, about things she had done and learned, about what she thought of this or that. He was, in those conversations, the brother she remembered, the person she had sat with the night before the ceiling, the child who had kept 3 paces of distance out of love. The warmth was real. She kept checking and it was real. And then sometimes it was not him. The first time it happened, she had been talking about a mission she had run the previous year and he had been listening, and then he had not been, or something in him had stepped back from the surface of him and something else had stepped forward. And she had watched his face remain the same face and the eyes remain the same eyes and something behind them become entirely different, something that looked at her with the same fondness but also with a quality that she did not have a clean word for. Ownership, perhaps. The word that kept suggesting itself was ownership. He would say something, in those moments, that was entirely natural and entirely warm and that she would agree with, and then he would say something that was connected to it that was completely wrong. And she would try to respond to the wrong thing and the warmth would pull back over it the way water covers a rock, and he would be himself again, and she could not always find the seam between the two. He talked about the clan. He talked about the people who had destroyed Yuzushio. He talked about the war that was ending and the violence that had preceded it and the violence that would inevitably follow it. And he talked about it in the tone of someone who found the whole thing both unsurprising and unnecessary. He said, "There will always be another war. There will always be another round of it. The nations grinding against each other because that is what nations do, and the ones at the bottom paying the price because that is what the ones at the bottom do." She said, "Yes." He said, "It does not have to be that way." She said, "Carefully. What would you do differently?" He looked at the ocean. He said, "If no one had chakra, there would be no more shinobi. If there were no more shinobi, there would be no more hidden villages. If there were no more hidden villages, the thing that has been grinding the world between its teeth since before either of us was born would simply stop." She was very quiet. He said, "I can do it cleanly. I have learned things in that vault that the elders who built it never imagined. I can draw chakra at range, at distance, from a person who is nowhere near me. The way the seal taught me to draw from the ambient current, extended outward the way a hand extends. I can do it to everyone, everywhere, all at once, if I choose, or in stages, which is kinder." She said, "They would die." He said, "Some of them, perhaps, in the transition. The ones who rely on chakra medically, the ones born with conditions that only chakra management holds stable. There would be losses, but the world would not end. The world would simply be a world without shinobi, which is not a world that has ever existed and might, given the chance, be considerably better than the one we have." She said, "Naruto, listen to yourself." He looked at her. He said, "I'm listening to myself. That is the point. I spent 15 years in a room with nothing but myself to listen to, and I have thought about this very carefully." She said, "You are talking about taking something from every person alive. Something fundamental, something they were born with." He said, "I was born with something fundamental that the people who loved me most decided to take away from me. I survived it. I am here. The world would survive it." She said, "That is not the same thing." He said, "No, it is not. My situation was considerably less fair." She stared at him. He said, "I am not going to do it yet. I am telling you because you should know. I am not going to do anything yet. I am here, on this island, with you, and that is enough for now." He said it with total sincerity. He said it with warmth. He said it with the voice of her brother who had kept 3 paces of distance out of love and argued with nothing and asked for so little. She stood at the cliff edge and looked at the ocean and tried to find the place in him she could reach and could not find it and did not let him see that she was looking. The warriors arrived without ceremony. She heard them before she saw them, the sound of movement in the old ruins of Uzushio that should have been uninhabited, and she came around the corner of a broken wall to find 12 people standing in what had once been the market square of the clan she had been born into. She recognized several of them. She recognized them not because they were strangers, but because they were not. She recognized the set of shoulders on a man who had been her uncle's sparring partner. She recognized the face of a woman who had run the Eastern Gate and who had told Kushina once, when she was small, that red hair meant you were descended from something that did not know how to stop burning. She recognized them and they were wrong. They were present and ambulatory and they looked at her with clear eyes and the particular attentiveness of people waiting for instruction. But they were wrong in a way she could feel before she could name it. The chakra signature coming off of each of them shaped in a way that was familiar and also was not, layered over something else that was not theirs. Their chakra was laid over a foundation of his. She said, to the nearest of them, to the man who had been her uncle's sparring partner, "Do you know who I am?" He said, "Kushina." She said, "Do you remember me?" He said, "Yes." She said, "Do you remember what happened to you?" He said nothing. She said, "What do you remember?" He said, "I remember everything. I remember the seal techniques. I remember every technique I have ever learned. I remember my family. I remember the clan." She said, "And you are here." He said, "We are here." She turned around. Naruto was standing behind her. He was smiling. He said, "I told you I had learned things in that vault. I told you the power I absorbed was stored. Kushina, I took their chakra when I was 5 years old and I have held it for 15 years inside me and it has been part of me for so long that I know it as well as I know my own hands. The techniques they carried are in that chakra. Their knowledge is in it. Their capabilities are in it. I can give it back. Not to them, exactly, I cannot reverse what was done. But I can make something new with it, something that retains what they were and is also, now, bound to me." She said, "You brought back the people you killed." He said, "I gave them a second life. I think, in the circumstances, that is more than they were owed." She said, "You are going to use them." He said, I am going to complete what I started. The process has already begun in some of the smaller settlements. My range extends further than it used to. I am practicing. She said. Stop. He said. Kushina. She said. Stop this. You will throw this entire world off course. Do you understand that? There are Jintoriki. There are children born with conditions that chakra manages. There are medical systems, infrastructure, things that cannot function without. He said. There will be losses. I have already told you this. I am not pretending otherwise. I am telling you that the losses are worth the outcome. She said. You do not get to decide that. He said. Someone should. She said it again, louder. Stop. He looked at her for a moment with something that was not quite the warmth and not quite the other thing either, something in between, something that was both at once, the love and the ownership and the absolute unbending certainty. He said, I am doing this for you. She said, I never asked you to. He said, I know. You never asked for anything. You never have. You went to Konoha because someone needed you to, and you stayed because you built something and you are grateful for what you have. I understand that. But this world took everything from you, Kushina. It took the clan and it took our parents and it took 15 years of having a brother and it gave you a war in exchange. I am going to take it back. She said, our parents died because of you. He said, I know. She said, the clan members who died before the seal, they died because of you. He said, I know that too. She said, and you are going to do it to everyone. He said, I am going to free everyone from the thing that makes what I am possible. I am going to remove the condition. No more chakra means no more people like me. No more weapons made from children. No more wars fought by children. No more Jinchuriki. She said, no more anything. He said, something will remain. The world will remain. People will remain. Only the violence will not. He said it with complete sincerity. He was her brother and he loved her and she could feel that and it was real. And he was also something that had spent 15 years alone in a sealed chamber learning to see the world through a lens that had been ground to a particular shape by a particular kind of solitude, and the two things were both true at once, and standing between them she felt something resolving into a terrible clarity. She could not reach him, not because she hadn't tried, not because the love was not real, but because the part of him that she could reach and the part of him that was doing this were not the same part, and he moved between them so fluidly that she could not find a clean line. And there was no clean line to find, because they were both him. The elder had told her this might happen. Hisako, before the end, had given her a seal. She had carried it for years without being certain she would ever use it, the way you carry a thing you hope will never be necessary. She thought about it now. She thought about what it required. She thought about Minato. She thought about a great many things in a very short time, standing in the ruins of a market square in the city where she was born, surrounded by dead people walking on borrowed chakra, with her brother watching her from across the square with absolute love and absolute certainty and the particular warmth of someone who sees no contradiction in what they are doing. She said, all right. He said, all right. She said, show me the island. Show me everything. If this is where we are going to be, I want to understand it. He smiled. It was her brother's smile. It was completely real. She smiled back. The message from the other villages came to Konoha in a wave over the following 2 weeks. A village in Wind Country, 90% of the population reporting chakra absence. The remaining 10% were children and 2 elderly civilians who had been born without chakra pathways. A garrison in Water Country, every shinobi incapacitated overnight, the civilian settlement nearby unaffected, the tailed beast that the garrison had been tasked with containing, gone. The containment seals dissolved not by external intrusion but from the inside out. The seal's chakra foundation stripped the same way everything else had been stripped, and the beast itself relocated to somewhere no one could yet determine. 3 beasts had been relocated. Minato stood at the war table with the Jonin commander and the heads of every department and read each report in sequence and said very little, because there was very little to say that would be useful. The Raikage's envoy arrived with a proposal for a coordinated response, and Minato listened to it and agreed to parts of it and said that the parts he was not agreeing to were not things he was going to agree to. And the envoy left unhappy, which was not unusual for envoys who dealt with Minato. He thought about Kushina. He thought about the way she had taken her brother's hand. He thought about the promise she had made him and whether she had known, when she made it, that she would have to make a harder one later. He assembled the best people he had and began to plan. The tailed beasts came to the island one by one over the following month, drawn or driven or simply directed by the careful extended reach of Naruto's power across the distances between them. They came the way wild things come to a source of food, not entirely willingly, not entirely unwillingly, the fundamental logic of their nature responding to something that was neither threat nor invitation but simply a condition, the same way metal responds to a magnet. Naruto absorbed what he took from each of them and reformed it in the way he had learned to reform everything he absorbed, in the vault, in the long patient practice of things that had no other laboratory. What came back was not the same beast but was not entirely different either. The core of each of them remained, the intelligence, the history, the accumulated weight of centuries. What changed was the framework around it, the arrangement of its power, the direction of its attention. They were, afterward, his. Not tame, not domesticated, something more fundamental than that. They were his in the way his own hands were his. Kushina watched this happen from the cliff above the shore. She watched the sea around the island change in character as the beasts settled their various presences into it and around it, the water shifting color in ways that had nothing to do with light or weather. She watched Naruto stand at the waterline and speak to things that did not speak back in language and did not need to. She thought about the seal that Hisako had given her. She thought about what it required. It required a human life offered willingly. It required a specific chakra signature, the particular quality of Uzumaki lineage that could interface with the containment script Hisako had designed for the specific architecture of Naruto's power. She could do it. She was the only person alive who could do it. Their similar chocolate traits, the thing that had made the elders consider her in the first place when building the original seal, was also the thing that made this possible. She would have to touch him. That was the thing. She would have to close the three. The question was whether it would be enough. She stood at the cliff and watched the ocean and made her calculations and found, at the end of them, that she did not know. The seal was 15 years old. It had been designed for a 5-year-old's power and adjusted for projection based on Hisako's estimates, and Hisako had been the best, and 15 years of additional growth in a sealed chamber were not something Hisako's estimates had accounted for. She did not know if it would kill him. She knew it would kill her. She decided that this was still the right answer, because the alternative was watching him reduce the world to ash one chakra signature at a time out of love for her, and she had spent her whole life being things for other people's benefit and she was not going to be a reason for this. She went to find her brother. She found him at the entrance to the vault, sitting on the stone steps with his elbows on his knees in a distant expression, looking at nothing in particular the way he had always looked at nothing in particular when something was on his mind. She sat down near him. She said, "I remember what you told me the night before the sealing." He said, "About Konoha." She said, "You said you did not want me to go somewhere you could not reach." He said, "I remember." She said, "You were right. I went anyway." "You were right and I went anyway because I thought it would be better for everyone, and for a while it was, and then the clan was gone and I was in Konoha and you were here and you were right." He looked at her. She said, "I am sorry I went. I am sorry I was not here when it happened. I am sorry for all of it." He said, "You don't have to." She said, "I know. I want to. I need to say it to you and I need you to hear it. Because you are my brother and I love you and I need you to know that I am here now and I see you and I am not afraid of you." Something crossed his face. She said, "I am not afraid of you." He said, very quietly, "Kushina." She closed the distance. She closed all of it. The 3 paces and the careful margin and every measured gap she had ever maintained out of respect for what he was, and she closed it and put her arms around her brother for the first time since she was 7 years old, and the seal in her chest activated on the contact the way Hisako had designed it to activate. The Uzumaki chakra flowing outward and inward simultaneously, reaching for the architecture of him. He held very still. He said, into her hair, "I missed you." She said, "I know. I missed you too." The seal burned. She held on. He felt it before he understood it, the same way he had felt the vault's containment in those first years, a structure imposing itself on his nature, a direction being given to something that did not take direction easily. He felt it and he held her and he said her name. She did not let go. The burning reached its peak. And then something happened that Hisako had not planned for and could not have planned for, because Hisako had been dead for 15 years and had not known what 15 years in a vault would produce. The seal reached the depth of him, reached the place where his power sat in its compressed and patient fullness, reached the part of him that was not the warmth and not the love and not the brother who talked about birds, and found it far larger than expected, and the seal that had been built to contain a 5-year-old's projection of growth was not large enough. It was not large enough. Kushina died anyway. The power that left her, the Uzumaki chakra that Hisako had designed to interface with his, did what it could. It was not nothing. It was significant. It tore through him in ways that were real and painful and left actual damage, actual disruption. The seal working is designed up to the point where the design ended and beyond that point doing only what remained of its capacity. It was not enough to kill him. He knelt on the stone steps of the vault with his sister in his arms and felt the life leave her and the damage the seal had done to him, and neither of these things was like anything he had vocabulary for. He was quiet for a very long time. Around the island, the sea changed color again. The pulse happened without decision. It was not something he chose. It was not something the warm part of him decided, and it was not something the other part decided. It was simply what happened when the thing that had been compressed and contained and managed and held in careful stillness for 15 years encountered a loss it could not process and found no reason to continue being careful. The pulse moved outward from the island in all directions simultaneously, below the speed of sound and above the speed of anything anyone had ever measured. The absorption expanding to its full natural radius for the first time in 15 years, and then beyond it, past any radius he had ever tested, past the island and the sea around it and the coast of the nearest continent, and outward and outward and outward. Every chakra signature it touched was taken. Not damaged, not depleted. Taken, completely, with the same totality with which the vault seal had taken from the 3 settlement members in the tunnel. The same fundamental stripping that left the biological structure intact and the chakra architecture simply absent. It lasted for 11 seconds. 11 seconds was a long time. When it ended, the world was quiet in a way it had not been since before the Sage of 6 Paths had first shown humanity what they were capable of becoming. She was breathing. He had not let her go. He had held her on the stone steps and felt the pulse happen around him and felt the world change in the wake of it, and the whole time he had held her and kept the one principle that superseded all others. She was not going to be gone. He had taken everything. He had taken it all in one pulse. The tailed beast's chakra and the Jinchuriki's chakra and the chakra of every living person in the elemental nations and everything in between, and he had drawn it into the reservoir that had been building for 15 years, and it was more than enough. He reached into it. He found what had been hers. He gave it back, not the same way he had given the clan members their second life. Not a restoration built over a foundation of his power. He found her specific signature, the Uzumaki red of it, the particular shape he had known since before he had memories, and he gave it back entirely, and then he bound it to his own, the way you bind a flame to a source of fuel, and he made it so that it could not go out as long as his did not go out. She breathed, her eyes opened. She looked at him. He said, "You are not going to do that again." She stared at him. He said, "I understand what you were trying to do. I understand why. You can tell me that you were right if you want, but you are not going to do it again." He said, in a voice that was barely a voice, "Naruto." He said, "I know." She said, "What did you do?" He said, "What I needed to." She said, "The world," he said, "is still there. The people are still there. They are simply not shinobi anymore. They are not Jinchuriki anymore. They are people. That is all they ever needed to be." She said, "You killed people. The ones who depended on." He said, "Yes." He said it plainly, without flinching from it. "Yes, some of them." The transition had not been clean. He knew that. He was going to know that for a long time. She said, "Minato." He said, "Alive. I know which signature is his. He is alive." She was quiet for a moment. He said, "I am going to build something here. On this island, with what I have, I am going to make something that does not require violence to maintain. And you are going to be here to tell me when I am wrong about things, because you have always been better at that than I am, and I have been alone long enough." She said, "You cannot just." He said, "I know." She said, "You cannot simply decide that you are going to rule the world because..." He said, "I am not going to rule it. I am going to make sure it does not consume itself. That is different." She said, "Is it?" He said, "I will try to make it different. That is the best I can offer." She looked at him for a long time. She said, "I am angry with you." He said, "I know." She said, "I am furious with you." He said, "I know that too." She said, "This is not what I wanted." He said, "It never is." He said it with his brother's voice, with all the warmth it had ever held, and she heard it and hated it and could not make herself stop loving it, because it was real, and it had always been real, and that was the most terrible part of all of it. Outside, across the sea, in a world that was waking up to a morning in which it was fundamentally different from what it had been the night before, the long work of understanding what had happened was only just beginning. On an island in the middle of the ocean, a young man sat on the steps of an ancient vault and held his sister and waited. He had always been patient. The end.
So that was it, guys. More series and movies to come. I hope you guys enjoy each and every one of them. I'm out for now. See you guys soon. Peace.